Patrick, at the beginning of the month, you highlighted some areas of opportunity that the community could focus on in 2025. And the first one, and one I found really interesting, was this look at different clinical guidelines, evidence gaps, and potentially areas where Odyssey could contribute. And we'll get to it, but clearly that inspired a lot of the community. We had some really great ideas and presentations. I want to go back to the original concept though, because it's a little different than maybe looking at specific diseases or conditions that the community has often researched. What about clinical guidelines? Did you think this is an area that Odyssey can really make a contribution?
Last year we focused our efforts around evidence dissemination, and we were able to highlight some of the great work that came out from projects such as Legend Type 2 Diabetes and our partnership with Jack. And that got us thinking about how do we go about maximizing the impact that we can have as an Odyssey community. It's one thing that we've now developed standardized practices to generate evidence at scale. It's another thing that we can actually disseminate the evidence, but ultimately, for us to really have impact on the lives of patients around the world, we need to be making sure that we're focusing on the questions that matter most to clinicians, where they're facing difficult decisions and various options, and there's not enough evidence to support making the right decision. And clinical guidelines are a primary way that providers around the world learn about what are the emerging best practices to be followed. And those guidelines, many of them are written in such a way that they try to be honest about which guidelines are based on strong evidence that have come from robust clinical trials, which decisions or recommendations are being made purely based on expert opinion, and where are there situations where there's weak evidence or evidence gaps. And when we look through those guidelines and we see those evidence gaps, that presents us the opportunity to say, how can we generate evidence so that we can either strengthen the confidence in the recommendations that these guidelines are providing, or potentially actually answer the unanswered questions and allow for there to be new recommendations that can really drive clinical care. So I think it's a great opportunity for our community to rally around areas where we can maximize the impact to the lives of the patients we're aiming to serve.
I know you set up a forum post a forum thread to just allow people to share some guidelines and some of their insights into where the community can make a difference. And then we had a couple of community calls, and I was really impressed with the amount of insight and detail and really terrific presentations that people can watch, all linked in this newsletter. Did you see what you were hoping to see out of the community?
Well, I was really impressed by the depth and breadth of the ideas that the community came up with. I was didn't really know what to expect when we opened the invitation for folks to throw out ideas, but was really happy to see so many different folks in our community have the courage to not only share their thoughts, but also to volunteer to potentially translate that thought into a study idea that could translate into a network analysis. What I think was really exciting to me was to see the breadth of different opportunities that were raised. We had ideas in oncology and immunology and psychiatry. We had areas that were focused on looking at pharmacotherapy and the safety and effectiveness of treatments, but we also saw recommendations centered on treatment screening and other guidelines associated with just the practice of care. And all of these really represented great opportunities to generate evidence about the characterization of healthcare practice and to estimate the effects of interventions in ways that I think really could move the needle in terms of having an impact. So congratulate those that actually did have the courage to bring it up. And to your question of like, did it meet the mark? And ultimately, our goal for this effort was to bring new ideas to the community so that the community itself could have the activation energy to focus on these studies. So really looking forward to seeing the response from the community, for folks to sign up for which studies they want to contribute to and how they want to contribute. And my hope is that we've had 14 really great ideas, and I'd love to see all of them move forward as a community, as long as we have the right level of support and interest from the community to help support these leads in bringing their ideas to practice.
There's a forum right in this newsletter, also on the website, to for people to share what studies they want to join and how they want to contribute. So that is certainly still open. Will be open for another week or so in early February. We move now into Phenotype February, and this is an activity that's gone on in the community for 3 years prior, and a lot of exciting work has been done. But this year, really, we're trying to build off of what we just did in January with these clinical guidelines and potential studies, and use Phenotype February for the next step. Can you talk about what you're hoping to see out of Phenotype February?
Phenotype development evaluation is a critical pillar of all of the work we do to generate real-world evidence from our network of databases. Our phenotype work group, led by Gautam Rao and Azza Shwabi's, really been a great focal point for folks that are looking to develop clinical ideas and translate them into operational definitions. In our prior years in Phenotype February, we really tried to focus on the science of phenotyping and to have a community activity focused on collaboration. One thing that those prior years were missing, though, is that we didn't actually have a specific motivation of a specific study to drive those phenotypes through, not only getting through the phenotype process, but then that leading into subsequent analyses. And so now, with these guideline-driven evidence opportunities that the community has raised, this now gives us a list of phenotypes that present the targets for us to develop. So during Phenotype February, I expect that we're going to walk through the process that we've been evolving as a community. We'll walk through the process of developing clinical descriptions and reviewing the prior literature to see what's already out there. We'll work through the cohort design and development process, creating operational definitions in Atlas. We'll evaluate those cohorts using cohort diagnostics and other open source OHDSI tools, and we'll iterate through that process, looking at the results across our data network to try to figure out whether or not we've got algorithms that are going to be fit for use for these studies. And I think the fact that we now have this range of studies that give us very specific targets of indications and outcomes that we need to move those studies forward, hopefully gives us the motivation for making Phenotype February a successful effort that delivers tangible outputs that will go as inputs into the rest of the analysis process.
As we've done over the last couple of years, Phenotype February will also be a chance for the community to hear about the work that's going on in the different work groups. We'll hear about OKRs. We'll hear about missions from the different work groups, some very new, some who have been around for quite a while, but also an opportunity for them to talk about where specifically, in those community focuses. Again, you can hear that first call of the year in this newsletter as well, but where work groups can assist in the OHDSI mission over this next year. So really should be a fantastic month of calls. I hope everybody continues to join. Thanks for joining, Patrick.
Thanks, Craig. Science!